Hello, everyone, and welcome to SCORE Fairfield County's live webinar on Prepare for Takeoff, How to Launch Your Brand in 3 Steps and Soar Above. I'm Bob Hogan, the webinar coordinator today and a business mentor here at SCORE Fairfield County. I'm going to be your host, and our presenter is Ramon Peralta. More on Ramon in just a minute, but first some brief information on SCORE. SCORE is a nonprofit national partner of the SBA, and locally here at SCORE Fairfield County, we have about 100 volunteers with a wide range of industry process and subject matter expertise, and we offer 3 primary value-added services to small business owners. First of all, we offer one-on-one business mentoring, and we can do that either face-to-face, video, telephone, email, and you can access that by using the yellow bit.ly link on the screen, or you can go to our website and click on the Request a Mentor link. Secondly, we offer a wide range of educational workshops and webinars like the one today, roughly about 100 throughout the year. And lastly, we offer extensive resources on our website, including access to subject matter experts. And when you're on our website, you can take advantage of a number of archived webinars on a wide range of topics as well. Our next live webinar will be next Tuesday, November 16th at noon, and the topic is tax items to consider before the end of the year, with Joe DeGostin presenting. And again, you can find more specifics on that on our website, fairfieldcounty.score.org. Just some logistics for today. We have set aside time for Q&A at the end of the presentation. And if you have a question, you can use the Q&A button at any time to type your question in, and Ramon will take them at the end of the prepared presentation. Our webinar will end sharply at 1 o'clock to respect your time. The session is being recorded, and the link to the recording will be available on our website within the next 24 to 48 hours. It's now my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Ramon Peralta. Ramon is from Peralta Design, a Shelton-based full-service digital creative agency specializing in branding and web development for entrepreneurs and startup companies. He has 20+ years of experience developing corporate identity and creating B2B and B2C marketing material and UI UX design. Ramon developed a passion for innovation after serving as a senior art director on the original startup team behind Priceline.com. It's now my pleasure to turn it over to Ramon. Ramon, it's all yours.
Hey everyone, thank you. Thanks for tuning in. We've got a record number of registrants, which is exciting. Thank you, Bob, for the introduction. My name is Ramon Peralta with Peralta Design, and we launch brands. And I love this particular workshop that I'm giving today. Just some quick stats. In 2020, during the pandemic, over 4.5 million new businesses were created in this country. That was up from 3.5 million in 2019. And there's a saying that, never let a good crisis go to waste. So I think we're going to see even more businesses, being started. And that's what this workshop is all about. In my experience, again, I was on the team that started Priceline. I know I'm dating myself for some of our younger attendees. I also launched my own company, Tasty Golf Tees. I thought I was going to sail off into the sunset, creating a golf product. Right before social media really took off. And I've had several opportunities to attend executive business programs at Tuck. In 2008, during that recession, I was laid off. And so I know the feeling of starting from the ground up with a business. And over the last 14 years, I've grown PD to now employ 10 full-time employees. We have our headquarters here in Shelton, Connecticut, and we have a satellite office in Palm Coast, Florida. So I'm very familiar with the startup path. The team that we've built is really kind of honed in on how do we launch brands quickly. So that's what I'm going to kind of walk you through today, some strategies that I think you'll be able to glean some good experience and hopefully build your business a lot faster than I have over the last 14 years. We were named one of the best companies in Fairfield County recently, and I'm really just enjoying this journey of helping others launch their businesses. So we'll dive right in. Brand strategy is the most important thing right now for your business. We unfortunately don't have the luxury before of just kind of going out to these big convention halls and exchanging business cards. And so we've got to figure out other ways to build our brands. And we're going to dive right into these 3 easy steps, because good branding ultimately is going to attract your target customer. So all of these strategies, yes, I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Visual Arts. I'm really big on the visual fidelity, on user experience, user interface, but ultimately we're not just in this to make pretty pictures. We want to convert. And we're going to start with step 1, which is creating your brand identity. And that involves brand naming and logo design is what we typically consider to be brand identity. When you think of your business, right, and your branding, think of it in the shape of this rocket. We use this metaphor at PD, but it's also very useful to think of it this way, because your brand is what typically people see first. So we got that at the front of the rocket, but your brand includes a lot. And we're going to look at a slide that I'm famous for sharing, which is the Brand Iceberg. But think of your brand as including your logo design, but also your messaging and also your story, your slogan, your colors, and think of your website as the first step in kind of establishing a digital footprint or a digital presence where you're going to drive traffic to with a digital strategy. And that's why the digital is kind of where the engine is, or the propulsion, if you will, because you're going to use social media, you're going to use email, you're going to use some paid advertising in the form of Google Ads to really drive traffic. So we're going to cover a little bit of search engine optimization and search engine marketing, and to some best practices to really get you and your business high above the competition. Because it's, no matter what you're doing, chances are you're in a pretty crowded space. So branding is not just the logo. The average person thinks that when they hear the word branding, and sometimes it could be somebody saying, hey, yeah, I do branding. I could put your logo, on a poker chip or something great, or on a bottle or on a mug. While all of that is great, it's not really what branding's about. There's so much more below the surface that as a new business owner, and I'm hoping, because this is virtual, I can't kind of canvas the room, but I'm hoping that many of you that are listening here or watching are actually on the verge of starting your own business, or maybe have started it and are really looking for some insight into how to best position yourself online, how to drive traffic to your site, how to create a memorable brand, or one that's going to really soar. So all of this stuff here below the surface is super important for you to be thinking about at this stage, right? What's your process? What's the customer experience? What makes you different, right? And those are some of the things that you want to highlight. And we're going to cover that a bit more when we talk about your brand story. But think of what your mission statement is. What's your promise? What's your company voice, right? And how does that kind of come across visually for your business? A top 10 brand launch checklist. And we're going to start with the naming shortly. But you want to kind of have these things in mind. And thankfully, this is all going to be recorded and you can check this out later. But you want to have a defined business strategy. How are you going to make money? Who are your target clients? It can't be everyone. If it's everyone, then you're going to disappear into the background because you need to have a niche. You need a hook. So research what that client group is. Where do they hang out at? What platforms are you most likely to find them on? Develop a messaging strategy, something that's repeatable, consistent. Develop your name, your logo, your tagline. That is such an important part of this. And I'm going to tell you why in a minute. Creating your brand story, right? If back in the day before we had phones, when we were eating, we would sometimes read cereal boxes, or we would read a jug of juice and read what was on there. But today's consumers are reading those stories online. And so why you started your business is really a foundational piece of your brand story. And oftentimes it's why somebody picks your product over another, or your service over another. If you hear me in my brand story, I still 30 years later, tell people I was on the team behind Priceline.com. I got laid off in 2008. Those are part of my brand story. I'm passionate about helping others launch their brands because I was forced to launch mine, and it's dedicated to helping others. That's part of our brand story. Think about what is your brand story. Develop a content marketing strategy that's going to utilize that brand story as a foundation for all of its content. Create a website, create a marketing toolkit. What is the best way that your target audience consumes media? Are they listening to the radio? Are they driving on 95? Are they browsing the internet? Are they more old school direct mail audience, right? And then the last thing, and probably the most important thing on this checklist, is implementing and analyzing and tracking. You've heard this metaphor or this advice, I should say, of, build a ship as you fly, right? Well, you don't want to try to wait until everything's perfect before you launch. You want to launch quickly with an MVP or a minimum viable product so that you can start getting feedback from your clients, and then you can start making adjustments. Right? If something's not working, don't do it. If something's working, do more of that. It sounds a lot like common sense, but a lot of people start businesses and they just start throwing money and they're not sure what's working. And it's more of a shotgun approach. And we want to take a little bit more strategy behind that before you do that. So brand naming is a lot of fun because it could make or break your business in certain ways. And let me explain. One of the first things that we do, and I'll give you a little insight into our naming process, is we go to websites like shop.spacehost.pro or other kind of URL. GoDaddy has a search box that you can utilize as well. And we look to see if the URL is available once we have some ideas. And it's very important to understand that what your company name is might not be what your product name is, and that it's okay to have a kind of internal legal company name and then have a DBA or a more consumer-friendly facing name. And we most recently saw the difference in that explained when Facebook just rebranded over to Meta. And you're wondering, well, is Facebook going to change or Meta's a dumb name or whatever? People have had a lot of kind of guttural mixed reactions to that. But the reality is that Facebook has grown. Since it launched, it's purchased Instagram. And Meta is now the name of actually the parent company. Where Facebook used to be the parent company, now Facebook is just a product. So it's something to think about as you're naming your company. For example, Peralta Illustration and Design, LLC is our legal name, but it's not very consumer friendly, right? Peralta Design is our consumer name, and that's our DBA. And it's a strong name because it has design in the name. It has a keyword in the name. So when you're thinking of names for your business, and it's okay to rename your business if you don't have such a great naming, and doesn't mean you have to change it legally, just means you add a DBA to it, which stands for doing business as, is you can use a tool called Google Trends, and you can see what keywords are people searching when they're looking for your type of business. So are they a good example is we recently tried to name were hired to name a staffing agency. Right, so this staffing agency was called Emerald Staffing, and we're in the middle of like branding them right now. And they were torn between, should it be Emerald Talent Group or Emerald Staffing or Emerald Staffing Solutions, or it was between like using the word talent and using the word staffing in their name. And we utilized Google Trends to see what were people searching, and we found that most often people were utilizing the term staffing, and so we recommended Emerald Staffing be the name of their company. And then we went on to see whether or not there were other companies with the same name. We utilized Google for that, but Google Trends can be very helpful in this process of naming your company. So you want to have a name before you start developing the logo. Once you start doing the design of the logo, and there are many services out there. 99 Designs is one, Fiverr is another. You're like, hey, I'm not paying a designer to do this. I'm going to either do this myself or I'm going to use one of these services. The challenge with using a service like that is that they don't really take any of these things into consideration. They're just going to show you things that look cool, and you're going to pick something based on the fact that it looks cool. And you're not going to really take advantage of making something that is proprietary, that can be trademarked, right? Something that reproduces well in just one color. oftentimes when you utilize services from a designer that's not a marketer or a designer that doesn't have a business background, is that you'll get something that might look pretty, but it's not going to be effective for you to utilize as a brand that you can trademark, that can use in one color, that can reproduce well for black and white, that has the psychology behind the colors. Believe it or not, there's a psychology to colors. If you look at banks, most often they're blue or they're green. Police uniforms are blue, tend to be because blue has a trusting psychology to it, and every color has something to it. Obviously, Big Squawk Shop, we utilize the colors from an avocado, but you'll look at restaurants, typically they'll have colors that are earth tones or food colors. You know, our branding is red because, you know, we're in a crowded space and it really helps us stand out. So we utilize that color quite a bit in all of our branding. So there's definitely some psychology behind it. And it also ties into whether or not it aligns with the company personality. The fonts that you use are very important. If you saw a hand-painted sign that said, you know, farm fresh eggs on a piece of wood on the side of the road, you might pull over because you figure like, hey, a farmer is selling these, you know, farm fresh eggs. But if you saw a hand-painted sign in the same exact font and it was for flying lessons, you probably wouldn't pull over because you could imagine based off that sign whether or not that plane is safe, right? So we have biases and psychological biases that we get from a brand's colors, from a brand's font usage, whether it's whimsical or serious. So these are all things that you really should consider when you're developing branding. And how is that branding going to carry over into your other marketing materials, right? You want to be consistent. You want to be able to kind of carry that look and feel. Does it work well stacked? Does it work well on one line? Brand identity is super important. This is most often the first contact that people have with their consumer. This is an example of one that we did as a rebrand, but you can see that the top logo here, Bobby Taylor Painting, was something that was done in the 80s, and it didn't translate well to social media because they didn't have an icon that could fit in that square profile space that you get. So I really highly recommend, if you're doing branding, brand identity, to create an icon that can be easily embroidered and that can take up that space of a square and be an avatar for you on the different social media platforms. And it works well as something that can go on a mug or anything like that. Corporations, employees, staff, team members, they love swag. So you want to have something that will translate well, you know, like our logo, you see the Bobby Taylor Painting logo on there as well. And yes, I'm gonna make sure that I leave 10 or 15 minutes at the end for questions and answers. That's typically my favorite part. This is some branding that we're doing for a brand new store that's going to be opening in Trumbull. They're aligned with you know, special needs students that are going to be running it. It's through a special needs program at Trumbull High. And there we help them, you know, with the branding here, and they're going to be selling used books as well as coffee. So you can see how the icon that we created is like a coffee mug, and it's a book, and it's simple, and it could be used on uniforms, and it could be used on mugs. So this is kind of like that brand identity design that I'm talking about, is making sure that you have a color palette that can be utilized across all your collateral. It makes for strong branding when you have an icon and a typographical type of logo. JFS Carrier Homes, another example. They were having a challenge because people thought they only took care of Jewish people. They had a strong association with Jewish Family Services. And when we did their rebrand, we de-emphasized the JFS. It needed to still be there, but we made Care at Home more prominent than JFS. So this is just a quick rebrand where oftentimes you don't need to do a complete makeover. You just need to do a refresh. And when you're doing refreshes, you want to keep some breadcrumb trails. In this case, we kept the color palette as something that connected it to their previous brand. This was another refresh that we did. I don't want to take up too much more time on brand identity, and we'll keep moving. Insomnia Cookies is one of my favorites. We didn't design this one, but I just love how they had a differentiator of being late night delivery and they utilized a logo, created a logo that has a cookie that was bitten out to look like a crescent moon. I just think it's super clever, and I think you might get some ideas from it as well. This is how their branding carries over into their website. And you can see how color palette, font treatment, the elements of your logo can carry over into creating patterns and things that really help tie in all of your branding. So step 2 is, how do you tell a good brand story, right? So you got your name, you got your brand. Now you're working on how to tell a good brand story. Never let a good crisis go to waste. I said that in the beginning, and it's a great way to kind of, figure out how do you tell your brand story, right? Here are some things that might prompt you, or some what I call brand story igniters. What is unique about you? Right? We all have a unique history, a unique work experience, unique passions. Make sure that's coming through. What are some of the basic beliefs and values or social causes that you stand behind as a business? That can be part of your brand story, right? Is it disruptive? Does it do the unexpected? Does it have something unique to it that nobody else is doing that you can somehow highlight? Some of the 3 main brand thoughts that you want to consider, right, is what do you offer? How will it make my life better? And what do I need to do to buy it? So as you're putting this into your marketing materials and you're planning out what your website's going to look like, or you're even pitching this to someone, do they get these 3 main brand thoughts when they meet with you and get that information? Now that you're kind of like more honed in on actually creating some narrative, because this is the type of content, right, that you're going to need to populate a social media page, to populate the About Us section on your website, to populate a brochure. I mean, you can sit down with a designer, but the content, right, either you have the means to hire a copywriter, right, which a lot of companies just do, they have the funds. But if you don't, and you think like, hey, I want to take a hand at this, or you work out a deal with an agency where it's like, I'm going to provide the content, I just need the branding. Okay, well, content's not that easy, but this is a good kind of framework for developing a brand story, right? So start out with writing everything about your past, your present, your future. What is it about the founder? Why did you get motivated to do this? And then you can take that first piece and sum it up as to, why does the company exist? Why are you here? What are you going to do to make the world a better place? I'll say this in the presentation in a few minutes, but 80% of today's consumer is looking to support a brand whose not only values align with theirs, but is also making the world a better place. Number 3 is you take this brand story and you base it off number 2 here. So you start off with 1, 2, and 3. And in number 3, can't stress this enough, being authentic and honest about your branding and not trying to sound like somebody else or not trying to sound fake. Don't say you're coming out here to save the world if you're really not passionate about it. People can kind of read between the lines, and you want to make sure that your brand is coming across as super authentic. And this becomes the basis. I'll show you an example here. For those that are still kind of on the fence, how does this actually work? Insomnia Cookies, again, I just love them. Here's an example of their brand story. It's the beginning, but it tells you they were founded in a college dorm room. What makes them great? They deliver to these people in the middle of the night. Why somebody in college would want cookies at 3 a.m, do the math. But this was the nucleus of how they started their company, and their franchises for them all over. And, prior to them, Mrs. Fields was probably the most famous kind of cookie retailer. But Insomnia is really, really taking off. And part of it is they have great branding, a great brand story, and they have a differentiator. They deliver well into the night. And that's a disruptor. In their field, that was a disruptor. So you've got your branding, you've got your brand story. Now it's all about establishing a digital footprint. Again, I preface this by saying we don't have the luxury of going into convention halls as much as we used to and exchanging business cards and having conversations. So you've got to figure out a way to drive people to your site so that you can have a strong call to action there and you can convert them either to get them to download a white paper, sign up for an appointment, book a consult with you, whatever that call to action is. How do we get them there, right? So you do this by, first of all, having a great website. And everyone that's registered here is welcome to get prioritized to come to our website and fill out a form to request a free website report card. We'll do this for free. If you mention SCORE on there, we'll make sure to prioritize you. But we basically do this complimentary assessment where we measure your website according to a rubric where we factor in design, the usability, the performance, SEO, and what does the content look like. And we'll give you a letter grade that you can take back with a summary of our recommendations, and you can actually make some improvement. So you're all welcome to apply for this, Helen. Yes, it's something that we love to do to help to give back. So definitely please take advantage of that. And again, if you mention SCORE, we'll turn it around even faster for you. SCORE has been a great partner of ours, and this is volunteer. I love doing it, and I love helping other people launch their brands. User experience, right? You hear me say CTA or calls to action, and you're wondering, what is that? You need to have clear call to actions on your website, or else people go there and they don't know what to do. It's kind of like you send out an invitation, come to my house, I get there, I don't know where the front door is. I don't know where the doorbell is. I can't even tell if people are home. It's the same thing. You want to have a website that has clear calls to action, because people have this super short attention span. They're scrolling. They're most likely finding you on their phones. And are they gonna keep scrolling, or are they gonna know what to do? So make sure that you have a clear call to action of what you want them to do. Bobby Taylor Painting, one of our clients, are based down in Georgia. They have very, very clear call to action. They want people to call, right? They feel they have a higher close rate, and they have the staff on hand to actually pick up the phone. So their call to action is call us. The other thing they wanted to highlight were that they were MBE certified. They wanted to highlight that they were certified as a minority business enterprise. So they basically said, we want all these things highlighted. So our job is to make sure those things are above the fold. So what you're looking at here is considered above the fold. For those of you, again, I'm dating myself. If you're Gen X like me, you remember that they used to sell newspapers on the corner of on the street corners in a box, and you put in 50 cents and you pull out a newspaper and you'd be on your way if you were like out and about. Whatever you saw above the fold, meaning that newspaper was folded and it was plastered in front, was meant to get your attention. Same thing on a website. When a website loads, what I see on my screen real estate without having to scroll is considered above the fold. So we highlight the main call to actions above the fold. If there's something that you want me to see, it should not be below the fold, because if I scroll up now, and there's a less likelihood that I'll do that than it is that if I get here and I look to see, okay, call us, and that button should make your phone ring, and then we're off to the races. Some SEO basics with establishing your digital footprint. This is something more or less for your web developer to be conscious of, but if you're doing this on your own, there are some things you can glean from this. Number one is probably keyword density. So again, you can use Google Trends to identify what are the main keywords that people are looking for. Make sure that as you tell your bio, as you write your about us section, as you explain what your service offerings are, that you utilize those keywords as much as possible, because that's going to help your page kind of show up on Google a little bit better. Mobile friendliness is super important. If your website's dated, if you launched your brand, several years ago, you might need to do a refresh, because you want to have a website that shows up well on tablets, on phones, and on desktop. And Google is not even paying attention to websites that don't show up on tablets and phones anymore. So you want to make sure that for your own searchability, you have a mobile-friendly website that has great keyword density. The rest of this stuff, SSL encryption is important. If anyone that's registered today listening is doing any sort of e-commerce or wants to take any kind of payment from visitors, make sure your SSL certificate is up to date, because otherwise people are getting a big message, especially from Chrome, that says to them, this website is not safe. And if you're spending money on advertising and you're driving people to your website and something as simple as an SSL certificate, which is only like $60, $70, right? Less than $100, you can have a safe website, meaning that you see that little lock up there. If you don't have that, if you let that expire, you're losing out, because people are coming to your website and they're afraid. They're seeing a big warning that's telling them, don't put your credit card onto this website because it's just not safe. So SSL encryption is super important and something that gets overlooked often by small business owners. Pay-per-click is a great feature that you can establish in a campaign, so that you are also paying to appear on searches. So if somebody searches staffing, Emerald Staffing could have a pay-per-click ad that has their ad come up for certain geographic locations, for certain demographics, right? It doesn't make any sense for you to be paying for your ad to show up for somebody in Colorado if your service area is Connecticut. So with Google Ads, you can get very specific. You can have a budget that's set. You can say, hey, I'm only spending $500 a month. I'm paying $10 a click. And keep in mind, the more crowded your industry, the more expensive that pay-per-click ad is going to be, because it's all about supply and demand. And if you have something very, very unique, if you have a grass painting business where you're going around painting people's lawns green and nobody else is doing it, guess what? You're not even going to need to do Google Ads, because nobody else is competing against that. So keep those things in mind. And the other neat thing is you can pause it, or you can ramp it up. If you go through your budget really quickly, you're getting a lot of demand. And look at the Google Analytics, because that's how you're going to know if this stuff is working. And we're going to get into that. One of the things that we do a lot as a firm that I encourage even sole proprietors to do. Right before this, I had a call with a woman in DC or Maryland area who wants to launch her own brand as a psychologist, and she's already starting to write blogs. I also told her that pictures weren't really going to do her justice, because she presents as very like conservative. And when I got to talk to her, she was very energetic and lively and very kind of telling it like it is kind of thing. I said, you would do great with video content. So blogging, video content, podcasting, those are all great forms of content that help to kind of solidify your digital footprint that ultimately drive traffic back to your website. So it's super, super important. This is just an example of our podcast. I encourage you all to check it out on Spotify. It's called Mission Control. We highlight our clients and strategic partners on there. We put out a newsletter. An e-blast newsletter is another great way to kind of establish your digital footprint. So if you don't already have a database of emails, that's another thing you can do, is offer something on your website in exchange for an email address. If you're a nutrition coach, maybe you say, hey, download the top 10 superfoods that you're missing out on. And I'm like, yeah, I want that. And I go to download it, but it requires my email. Everybody nowadays is accustomed to a quid pro quo where they're okay giving up some of their privacy in order to get something for free. But now you're building a database of potential clients anyway that have self-identified as being interested in what you have to offer. How does this all work, right? So you've got your brand, you've got your digital footprint, you've got a content strategy, and you're trying to figure out, how does this all drive traffic back to my website? So what you're looking at here is a digital sales funnel for our own website. And I'm just using us as an example because we incorporate a lot of these things that I'm covering here. But you can see if you start all the way at the left, and I know it looks complicated, but if we start with a podcast, let's just use that for an example. We can extract audio from that podcast, right? And put that on Spotify. But we can also take video of that and put it on YouTube. And then we could take a shorter clip of that YouTube video and create a highlight reel. We can take that highlight reel and we can put it on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. So if you see how you can repurpose one piece of content and get a lot of mileage out of it. Now we're doing advertising. We're boosting those posts. That's what the little ad icon is. So we're boosting those posts so that we can grow our social media audiences, and we can drive more traffic back to the website. And then we can retarget some of that traffic so that they're seeing our website. They get to our homepage. Now they want to get a free consultation. Now they want to get a report card. Now we've added emails back to our database, and we can start sending those same people email newsletters. There's also the Facebook Pixel, which is a great tool that you can utilize on your website. If you add a Facebook Pixel to your website code, you can see when people visit your website and then go on social media. Now you can serve them an ad on Facebook because that pixel is kind of tracking where they go. And I know it's a little big brother, but that's what we've gotten accustomed to, is that we can advertise very targeted so that we can advertise to people where they are. We're getting close to the tail end, and I want to make sure that I leave some time for question and answers, but I want to kind of cover, you might be asking yourself, like, okay, so content marketing is great, but what type of content should I be putting out there? And what we're seeing more and more and more of is brand activism, or brands as humans. And what I mean by that is that the CEO of a brand, the president of a company, is or becomes the greatest brand ambassador for that company. So I do a lot of speaking, I do a lot of volunteering, and I document that, and that becomes content to market with, to drive people back to raise awareness on my brand and my company and so forth. So you can do the same thing. You just got to identify what is it that really matters to you. One of my favorite quotes is by Howard Schultz, who's a great example of a CEO as a brand ambassador for Starbucks. He's very vocal, very active, but this still holds true. And it's a quote that he said some time ago, but if people believe they share values with a company, they will stay loyal to the brand. So you as a founder, you as a brand ambassador, you can actually put your values out on blast, put them out there, speak out on the topics that matter to you, and your target audience will say, hey, I align with that, and I'm going to support this brand because I align with the values of the company, of the CEO. You're seeing it happen a lot, as we got through, this is now, we're going into our second year of this, but when we had the big shutdown, of course, everybody was home. And I just like this example because Zappos was a shoe retailer. And if everybody's home, they weren't selling shoes. So they decided to give away shoes to the frontline workers, and it kept their brand out on the radar. And all of this is just brand awareness. Just make sure that your company is out there and people are talking about it. People see what they're doing. We started a campaign with giving away free masks, and we started a hashtag Reopen Safely campaign, and people uploaded their pictures and tagged us, and it was great user-generated content. And it showed like, hey, PD cares about reopening safely. They're business focused, and they want to get back to business. And this campaign was proved to be very successful for us. Volunteering and putting the president or the CEO of your brand in different organizations is very important. And yes, I give away a lot of my time, but it helps. It aligns with our brand, and it aligns with the content that we want to put out there. Small businesses can do a lot in the community. There's a lot of nonprofit organizations that would love to have you involved. And that, again, it's a great way to align yourself. If you got a startup company and nobody really knows it, but you become a big sponsor or partner of Boys and Girls Club or United Way or Junior Achievement, that's super for your brand because it's showing an alignment, and you can leverage those brands. And plus, you're making the world a better place. You're doing something good. All right. So it's a great way to create more content, and you document this and show people what you're out there doing. Nike did this with Kaepernick. I know it's a controversial, polarizing figure to some, but they did this and their profits actually went up. Ben & Jerry's is another brand that's very, very vocal socially, and their profits have gone up. and they understand who their target audience is, and they're okay with alienating some people if it means that they feel like they're using their platform to make the world a better place. Patagonia is another brand. They actually sold these labels into their clothes, and they are so big on the environment and you know, they're very passionate about global warming, that they basically said if we have elected politicians that aren't taking this seriously, let's get rid of them. Like, that's how passionate they are to this. And their CEO is quoted as saying, every single time that they took a stand on something like this, whether it's the environment or the climate, their profits went up. So they understand their target audience. They don't care, that they're not out for everybody's money. They're out for their supporting with the things they believe in, and they're okay with putting that out on Front Street. And there are things you can learn even as a small business, that if it matters to you and it resonates with your target audience, that it's okay to say something about it. And in their case, profits go up. This is all about being a socially responsible company. And you know, in our climate with Gen X, with millennials, especially Gen Z, if a business is silent about something that matters to them, they look at it as complicity. So you've got to really say, you know, we've got to pick, if our thing is the environment, if we're an environmentally focused company, put it out there. You know, put it out there. Let people know that maybe the products you use are green, or that, you know, the carbon footprint is being reduced somehow with what you're doing. That a certain percentage of, you know, your proceeds go towards fighting domestic abuse or homelessness. You know, we're working with a real estate agency whose profits are going to go to a nonprofit arm of their company that provides solutions for affordable housing. So they're fighting homelessness by selling homes, right? That's a good example of a socially responsible company. Doesn't always have to be political. It could be some things that we all agree on, helping those less fortunate, right? For example. And remember, 80% of millennials expect the brands they support to take a stand on things that matter to them. So as we wrap up in the last few minutes, I want you to just take a peek. There's a lot here, and I'm glad this is being recorded because you can pause it and do whatever. But there's a lot to digest. I mean, this is everything we do. So you can't expect to just absorb this, you know, by osmosis in an hour. But you've got to pay attention to the analytics on your website. Once you have that brand and you have the brand story and you have a digital footprint, meaning you have a website up, make sure that your web developer or you yourself, if you're so inclined, have set up Google Analytics. It's free. Okay, all you need is a Gmail address. But you can look at the background of what's happening on your website. And in this case here, I wrote a blog about the Aunt Jemima rebrand, and we saw a huge spike in web traffic. So I can say, okay, it was flat. I wrote a blog, big spike. If you need a spike, write a blog, right? That's what I gleaned out of this. So it's very important for you to look at it. You can also see from Google Analytics, where is your web traffic coming from, right? In this case here, you know, a good 25% of our web traffic was coming from social media, right? We can also see what days of the week do we get more traffic. All this is important, and it may guide you as to what type of content you should be putting out there. We can also see the engagement off of the type of posts that we have. That's important, so that if you see a post and it gets a lot of engagement, post more of that type of content. In summary, the main thing for all of you that kind of ties this all together, whether it's creating your name, your brand identity, your service offering, what values are important to your company, is let yourself come through all of your branding, because the law of authenticity is super real, all right? That's how you're going to form a real connection to your customer. And that's why you don't have to worry about losing people for price, because the right people are going to come to you. They're going to be part of your community. They're going to be part of your tribe. It's our human nature to do business with those we like, with those we trust, with those whose values align with ours, so that my dollars are going towards a cause or an organization or a brand that I feel is making a difference, so that I can feel like I'm part of something bigger, right? So Make sure that who you are and what you do can align so that you can do who you are. And I'm telling you, it'll make your company that much more rewarding. It'll make getting up in the morning that much more rewarding, because when we're out of alignment, that's when we don't feel like we're ourselves. When you go into a job that's not doing what you think it should be doing, or that's supporting things that you don't think it should be supporting, you're out of alignment. But when you're in an alignment, you can be an authentic person. It's going to make the work that you do that much more impactful and that much more rewarding. And it won't even, trust me, it won't even feel like work. So some a quick brand checklist. Think about what you do best. Who do you do it for? What makes you different? Get your brand identity and your brand story set up. Make it memorable, make it repeatable. Communicate this as much as possible. Become the expert. Become a subject matter expert in what you do, so that people will think of you when they think about your business and your service offering. Some great recommended reading. I love The Go-Giver. There's a second book called Go-Giver, Sell More. Good to Great is a great book. Building a Story Brand is great. There's an associated curriculum that goes with it online where you can really help clarify your messaging. So I really like these books, and I'm definitely still working on my book, and we're looking at launching it in Q1 of 2022. It's being edited, but it's going to have a lot of the tidbits and best practices for launching your brand that I love to share with you all. And I'm going to, I think we have about 10 minutes or so for Q&A. Thank you for being out there. I'm assuming everybody enjoyed it and was engaged. I know there's over 100 of you out there registered. So I'll open it up for questions. And Bob, I'll stop sharing if you'd like me to. I can
you can leave that up there, okay. And you just, when you go back, and then if people want to contact you, they can do that. Okay. What we're going to do right now is we're going to use the remaining time for question and answer. We'll take as many as we can until the top of the hour. And if you could just use the Q&A button on your screen and type in your question. As I say, we'll take as many as we can in the time we have available. And maybe, Ramon, while we're waiting for some of the questions to come in, could you maybe talk a little bit about some of the distinctions in kind of launching your brand and the activities, and on how you would distinguish between launching a company with a product versus, say, a service? Any thoughts there on how to distinguish between the two, or whether they would be different?
Yes. And thank you, Norma. Thank you, Jenny, as well, and Helen. Just looking at the chat there. That's absolutely a great question, because there are two types. There is the company that's starting out that wants to also, the CEO wants to also build a personal brand, and they want to build their company brand. We often see that in the smaller venues, like let's say a psychologist, for example. We were just speaking with a woman who wants to start her own practice, but she also wants to be a speaker and she wants to be a lecturer. And so that's a different approach than someone, for example, who we met with yesterday, who's launching their own, seasoning for frying fish, right? So she's a caterer. She realizes that catering, she has a strong brand for her catering, but she realizes, like, I got to think long-term, I got to think legacy. So now she's launching her own products. And her first product is going to be like this breadcrumb seasoning that you use when you fry fish. And so as we're designing her packaging, we're thinking about, okay, how much emphasis do you want to put on your personal brand onto this package? So what we netted out was, she doesn't want to be on the front of it, but she does want to be on the back of it, so that she can have an opportunity to tell her story and have her brand story and be on there. So that makes it easy for us, because it's like, okay, her strategy is she's not interested in really being like the face of this thing. Her product has more emphasis. So you have to almost draw like an org chart and think long term and say, well, what do I see this being bought out by somebody, by a bigger brand? Do I want to keep this in the family and hand this off to my kids? Do I want to acquire other businesses? So you got to kind of think of the end and reverse engineer from that, and I say this to all of our clients, is to think bigger, right? You've got to really think bigger because, you know, life ends up getting better and better, and our businesses evolve. The universe guides us. There's going to be mentors that we reach out to. There's programs such as this where you glean more information, but try to think bigger, and try to map out what the ultimate goal is. And sometimes we do this by finding another company that we can kind of use as a blueprint. If we say, oh, well, I'm a psychologist, I want to start my own psychology practice, or I'm a speaker, or I'm a business coach. First thing I'll say was look at some of your competitors, or look at who would be kind of like your role models. Do you see yourself being a Tony Robbins or a Jack Canfield, or do you see yourself more like being bought out by Action Coach or something like that that's already a franchise? So there's a lot of things to it. I would offer everyone here, a 15-minute consultation to kind of start going through some of those questions, and that's free whether you utilize us or not. I love kind of sparking some of that conversation that may get some of those neurons firing, so you can kind of see a long-term vision for your company. And there's a phrase that I'll share with you, which is marry the mission, but date the process. And that applies to small businesses that are starting out too, is like, be really focused on what your mission is, right? Like my mission is to help other businesses launch their brands and become successful. So that's not going to change, right? But the process might change. How do we actually do that? And when I started out, I was only focused on branding. And then I got into web development, and my team got bigger. And then we were like, well, we're launching brands, we're doing brand identity, and we're doing websites. But then we started getting customers coming to us and asking us, well, what do you do after they launch them? Or I already have those things. What else can you do for me? And that ended up causing us to grow into a completely different service offering, which is digital marketing, which is now kind of like our three-legged stool with branding, web development, and digital marketing. But when I first started out, I wasn't thinking of that. So that's an example of how your customers will actually, if you're flexible on your process, but if you date your process, but you're married to your mission, it'll keep you on track for why you're starting your business, right? And who you started your business for. But don't get so hung up on how you do it that you miss the boat and you miss out opportunities on making an even greater business out of what you may have originally thought of.
That's great. Lots of good advice there. We have a question from Tom. Can you say a few more words about your opinion of Facebook/Meta?
Yes. I've had a couple of heated debates because some people got really upset about it, but I thought of it as a masterclass on how to do it, because you see that they kept their color palette the same. They tried to explain. I know that Zuckerberg, some people say he's a robot, or he's an android or something because of his personality, but he continues to choose to be the face of the brand, whether you love him or hate him. So he's an example of somebody that started the company and is still kind of steering the ship. And when he makes these big announcements, he wants to be the one to tell it, because he doesn't want to lose anybody that's already on board with Facebook. And now Facebook's a behemoth. It's got 2 billion people parked on there. But he needed to make this change because the company was getting bigger than Facebook originally started out to be. It's a great example. They bought Instagram. So now if you log into Instagram, you see at the bottom, it used to say Facebook was the company or the parent, but now it says Meta. So what he did was he tried to make a distinction between Facebook is no longer the company, Facebook is a product. But when it started out, Facebook was the company. Now Meta is the company, and Facebook and Instagram are products. The same thing happened with Mr. Potato Head, when everybody got up in arms when they dropped the Mr. from Potato Head, and everybody was like, it really got people in all into a frenzy because they thought it was like the real left, gender neutrality movement and so forth. And it had nothing to do with that. It was really about a company and a product. Mr. Potato Head is still Mr. Potato Head. That didn't change, but people felt like it did. It didn't. What changed was the parent brand is Potato Head, because under Potato Head, there's Mr. and Mrs. And what prompted all of this was they were putting out a play set that was going to allow children to, create their own families out of, playing. And they didn't want to call it Mr. Potato Head, because what if you didn't have a dad? What if you had two moms, right? So you understand here that there's a distinction between company and product. And what Meta, in my opinion, did was that announcement made it so that you see the hierarchy, but also when we talk about brand story, I think Zuckerberg wanted to make sure that the reason why he started Facebook was still, so he was still married to the mission. He wanted to be the one to deliver the news because he wanted to connect that original brand story that was originally applied to Facebook. He wanted to make sure that you felt it was still connected to Meta. And that's why he made that announcement. So love it or hate it, I think it was well done. And I think for businesses that are transitioning from having a company turn into a product and then have a bigger company name, I thought from a rebranding standpoint, it was well done, because he associated the same brand story to the new name. He kept the color blue connected to the new name, and he was the one to deliver the news. He could have had a spokesperson make that news, but people don't really pay attention and they don't read much and they don't listen, right? So visually, he felt like that's one less moving part. If I'm the one to deliver this story of the change, I can be a constant, or I can be a breadcrumb trail to the original Facebook brand. So I thought it was well done. I'm happy to have more conversations off it online. Obviously, you could tell I'm passionate about it, but it's definitely a great question.
We have another comment / question from Ginny, talking actually about the reverse, in that GE is deconstructing itself into separate businesses requiring rebranding. So perhaps do you want to have a few comments on the reverse strategy?
Yeah, so the reverse strategy is interesting, because oftentimes you don't want the baggage that's associated with the parent brand to be associated or negatively or adversely affect the smaller startup brand or the independent label. And that is a good strategy if you want to take a chance and venture out and try something new. And if it fails, it doesn't affect the parent brand, right? Or if you want to make it, we see it happening with Kia recently, or even General Motors. They've rebranded where they completely change their logo. And that's done intentionally, because in some cases, either you rename something totally different, or you redesign it so drastically that you are more interested in getting a new demographic than you are retaining your old one. So the only time that you would rebrand and keep a breadcrumb trail is if you have so much brand equity, positive brand equity, right? And going back to Facebook, part of the reason why they changed to Meta is because as a company, they were getting a lot of negative press for, allowing misinformation and privacy issues. So they had some negative baggage going on with Facebook as a company. So that was another reason, to be honest, that they rebranded. So when you see a GE deconstructing, they want to attract maybe a younger demographic or a different demographic, and they don't want any of their existing branding or baggage to tarnish or adversely affect what they're doing, especially if they're trying to get into a new space and get a new customer base. Then you don't want to have any relation to your old fogey or old Jack Welch or corporate kind of baggage that may be attached to their brand. And they have the money to do it. They could take a risk, they could sell it off, they can pretend to be independent, and unless you read the label, I mean, you can look at a company like Beatrice. They're a great example, right? So they own a bunch of brands that we don't know about, or Frito-Lay is another one. they own a bunch of brands that we don't know that they're all connected, but they're all owned. But the reason they look independent is because they each serve a different demographic. And that's important.
That's great. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for questions today. Just as a reminder to everyone, the webinar has been recorded, and those materials should be up on our website on fairfieldcounty.score.org under on-demand webinars within the next 24 to 48 hours. Our next live webinar is on Tuesday, November the 16th at noon, and the topic is tax items to consider before year end with Joe DeGostin presenting. And again, you can find those specifics on our website. Again, if you would like to take advantage of free individual counseling from a SCORE mentor, you can use the link on the screen that we put up earlier, or you can request a mentor by going to our website. And lastly, if I could ask you to please fill out your evaluations that have been sent at the end of the webinar. They're very helpful to us. So thank you again for all of you for attending today's live webinar, and a special thank you to Ramon for presenting. Excellent presentation today. And stay well, everyone, and have a great day.
Thanks, Frank. Thanks, Alice. Thanks, Bob. Thanks, everyone, for joining in.
Thank you.